The respect Nagmahashaya used to command among the shopkeepers did not fall to the lot of many rich men even. Nagmahashaya got more articles than other customers for the same price. But if he knew of it, he refused to accept the favor and urged the shopkeeper to give him only as much as he would give to others for the price. It was a habit with him to buy his toes only from one particular shop, and he could never haggle about the price of articles. He accepted things at the price first mentioned, but he was seldom cheated. He used to say, "If one has devotion to truth, the truth itself protects him. He basks in grace of God." Indeed, he was known for all his stainless to all, and no one dared or liked to cheat him. Moreover, he had that fascinating amiability of nature which won admiration and devotion from all. It happened many a time that he went to buy things from a new shop, and the shopkeeper, not knowing who he was, demanded at first an exorbitant price, but subsequently, struck by Nagmahashaya's ready acquiescence to pay the demanded price and his uncommonly amiable manners, he would climb down and whisper a special concession price into Nagmahashaya's ears, or dole out double the quantity required for the price. Besides, he had credit of another kind in the market. It was the general belief with the shopkeepers of the place that if they could sell their articles to him first at the opening of the day, they would gain more by the day's sale. So, when he went to the market, each dealer would urge him to take his articles. Sometimes not only had he to feed his guests and look to their comforts even to the minutest details, but also had to defray their travelling expenses. Once a certain person came to visit him and fell ill. Nagmahashaya nursed him with all tender care, and subsequently, when he had recovered a little, Nagmahashaya engaged a boat and sent him home, paying all the expenses of the passage. Such things happened not infrequently, but owing to such unrestrained expenditure, Nagmahashaya had to run into debt. Some of his devotees wanted to pay off his debts, but he sternly refused to accept their proffered help. When Swami Vivekananda, after his return from America, heard of Nagmahashaya's debts and desired to clear them, Nagmahashaya gently objected to it, saying, "It is enough that the sannyasins confer their blessings on me. Somehow or other, through weal or woe, my family would be maintained only by the money that is being given by Mrs. Pals." If any of his friends or devotees would express anxiety about his debts, he would at once retort, "Never mind, I would starve even if I do not get anything. Still, I cannot forsake the dharma of a householder. Pray don't bother yourself with such trashy nonsense. Let Bhagwan Sri Ramakrishna do what he deems best for me." Nagmahashaya never used to keep any servant for his house. While he stayed at home, it was not possible even to have the necessary repairing done to his house. He could not bear to see the coolies or masons work for him. So, when he was away from his house, his wife used to have the roofs rethatched and have the other necessary repairs and renovations attended to. Once Nagmahashaya stayed at home continually for a long time, and so, for want of timely repairs, all the rooms became almost unfit for use. Nagmahashaya's wife called a contractor to have the roofs rethatched. As soon as the man entered the house, Nagmahashaya cried out in anguish as if something very heinous was about to be perpetrated there. First, he himself prepared a nice chillum of tobacco and offered it to the mason to smoke, and afterwards, when the mason got up on the roof and began to work in the sun, the sight was too much for Nagmahashaya to bear. He asked the mason with earnest solicitude to stop work and get down. But when he saw the mason continue his work without paying heed to his beseeching, he could not contain himself. He wailed as if in blighting agony, O Lord, why hast thou ordered me to remain in the house and lead this wretched householder's life? Ah me, I have to witness this sight, others laboring for my comforts. Fie on this householder's life. And so saying, he began to beat his forehead and pressed. Seeing his agony, the mason had to stop work at last and get down from the roof. Nagmahashaya at once ran to him, offered him another chillum of tobacco, and began to serve him with all the devotion of a loving servant. Afterwards, he paid the mason his full day's wages and sent him home. When Nagmahashaya went anywhere by boat, he would never allow the boatman to row. He himself used to ply the oars or punt. Sometimes other passengers of the boat would try to dissuade him, but he seldom paid any heed to the others' exhortation. Therefore, seldom would a boatman of his place take him into his boat. The illiterate boatswains used to consider it a sin to allow a saintly person like Nagmahashaya to do the punting or sculling while they were in the boat. During the rainy season, the whole of Devbhog village would remain in a quasi-submerged condition. No one could go from one house to another without the help of a boat. So, in that village, almost every house owned a boat, but Nagmahashaya had none in the wet seasons. He had to remain almost confined to his house, and at times he must have felt the want very keenly, inasmuch as he had to provide himself with all the necessary articles of consumption beforehand. His wife used to look after this part of the business with the help of the neighbors. Every evening, Nagmahashaya used to hold the Vesper service and Aratrikam before the picture of Sri Ramakrishna. On those days when devotees congregated in his house, there used to be Sankirtanam. Nagmahashaya seldom took part in it. He used to sit in a corner and prepare chillums of tobacco for the congregation. But his presence would infuse an uncommon inspiration into the Kirtanam. When the Kirtanam was over, he used to chant loudly the name of Sri Ramakrishna and lose his whole mind and soul in the chant. Not only in Sankirtanam, but also on all other occasions of worship and ceremonies, there used to be an exuberant display of bhakti in his house. Once a devotee named Sarath Chandra Chakravarti went to his place on Saraswati Puja day. On being asked to do so, the devotee read out to Nagmahashaya a portion of the Upanishads and gave two or three interpretations on certain passages according to the different commentators. Hearing the whole thing, Nagmahashaya remarked, "All the interpretations are true. Different acharyas commented differently to suit the needs and capacities of different adhikaris. So the commentators are not at fault." Further, he cited the parable of the chameleon told by Sri Ramakrishna and said, "God is of infinite forms. One describes him just as he understands him. No one can assert exclusively that this alone is his true being." Next, pointing to the image of Saraswati on the altar, he remarked, "That is also true. Oh, how many did attain the final liberation by worshipping these gods and goddesses?" And so saying, he bowed before the image several times. The priest was engaged then in worshipping the goddess with all the requirements of a grand ceremonial worship, and the shrine and surroundings wore an appearance of celestial solemnity bathed in divine joy. Nagmahashaya rose up again and exclaimed, "Mother is the embodiment of knowledge itself. Without her grace, no one can get across the ocean of avidya. The Mother has made me ignorant and brought me into this insignificant Shudra family. I am not authorized to read the Shastras. So please bless me by reading and explaining the Shastras to me." Seeing his uncommon devotion to gods and goddesses, it crossed the mind of the devotee that perhaps Nagmahashaya had attained some realization only about gods and goddesses, and that perhaps he had not realized Brahma. While such ideas were agitating his mind, Nagmahashaya suddenly disappeared from the place and could not be found anywhere. After some time, when the devotee came out of the house in search of Nagmahashaya, he found him almost in transport, standing alone underneath a mango tree. The devotee went and stood by his side. Then Nagmahashaya said in a deep tone, as if from the depth of his reverie, "Forsooth, is my mother confined only within that image of clay and straw? She is the infinite Satchidanandamayi. My mother is the supreme knowledge itself." So saying, he lost himself again in deep samadhi, and it lasted almost half an hour. Often he used to fall into samadhi and remain in that state, sometimes for hours. On some days, this lasted for such a long time as to make his people feel anxious for his life.